It is awesome to be able to come up here and share some more thoughts with you all. Last week was a lot of fun, getting to see some old faces, see some new faces. I was told that there are buttons up here that move the podium. It's actually fine, but having those buttons right there, it's like an elevator. You just want to touch them. But I can be more mature than that. Just for those of you who are wondering who I am, my name is Nate Swayne. My dear wife Kennedy is here. My little daughter is in the nursery, and our buzzer has not gone off, so she must still be behaving. Give a shout out to my good friend Jeremy. So we are thrilled to be here, get to see you all again. Normally, when I'm during a service, I'm thinking about things that I want to say right when I get up front. And I have a pen with me that I write, but last week I noticed that the pen followed me up to the podium. And so people back home who were watching the service were like, "Bro, what were you doing with the pen? You gotta lose the pen." So I don't have a pen, but there's also no notes either on my paper. So a couple of things, just some stories that I should have shared last week, but the beginning got away from me a little bit, that I think are kind of funny, just to bring what this church body has meant to me, my family growing up. You all used to do Teens Involved here many, many years ago. I don't know when it stopped, but that was basically a fine arts competition for Christian kids. I don't know if that it would be primarily homeschool kids, but there was a number of activities that we could sign up for. There were the boom whackers. Anybody remember the boom whackers? It'd be a bunch of 2x4s, and we'd have these plastic PVC pipes that we'd bang, and they made different noises, so you could play music with these pipes. A lot of fun. But this is the place that I preached my first sermon here. There was a banquet on maybe a Sunday evening, and all of us kids spent the whole day practicing, and then we performed the things that we were going to be doing at the actual Teens Involved competition. And I did a sermon on Jonathan, and it was probably awful, but it was right there, right on the floor in front of everybody. So that, just kind of a neat thing. I also played baseball for the Alfred-Almond 7th through 9th grade team. And looking back, I was easily the worst player on the team. I got some playing time during the regular season. They put me in, I think, right field, which nobody hits to right field. So you can kind of put the little man there, and he'll feel like he's competing to the team. He can just pick dandelions. But the coach came to me during our playoff team and was like, "Nate, so we want to win these playoff games. So you're not going to get any playing time." But it is all good. Honesty is a good policy. So we're gonna look at the last two chapters of Ecclesiastes, and like Steve said last week, I shared some thoughts on Ecclesiastes chapters 1 and 2, and I appreciate you all being willing to read through these pretty long chapters. But just to sum up some of the thoughts, Ecclesiastes seems to be the musings, the writings of an old king. Many people suggest that the author, the teacher as he is called, is Solomon. And it would seem like he's looking back over his life and musing on things that he has learned. And in the first chapter, he is struggling with a reality that all of us must face, and that is the brevity of our lives. So he realizes, compared to the world around us, that all of us, no matter how healthy, no matter how youthful we are going to face the reality of death. And none of us want to think about that. None of us want to think about the reality of this life that we live coming to an end. But Solomon is. And he deals with this problem with two main answers. He's seeking to find answers through study. Help me to understand all of this stuff. If I understand all the answers, then that'll just make me feel better. But the more that he studies, the more that he learns, he realizes that the wisest man on the earth, who maybe is him, and the foolish person on the earth, both are going to face the same reality of death. So we ask the question, so then why have I put all this time into being wise? And then the second thing is he looks at the the vanity of our possessions, our achievements. Solomon built an awesome world for himself. He raised his country to the pinnacle of its power. He was the one that got allowed to build the temple. He had trading partners, stuff going all over the world. Wealth, peace, this is what he did. But at the end he realizes, I am still going to die, and when I die, all of this goes away. I was talking with somebody this morning. We don't get to take the things that we have with us. And so his takeaway is that everything is vanity. This word, vanity, I don't do word studies that often, but specifically here I think it's important. The word vanity or futility is smoke or vapor. So if you think about what smoke, what vapor is, that is what he's comparing our lives to. So as important as we want to feel about our lives, the impacts that we are having, compared to the world around us, compared to time, it is like smoke. And so these last two chapters, I'm going to suggest that we're going to see a little bit of a turn from Solomon here. And his message is this. There's actually several messages, but just to sum it up, it's an important one. All of you will grow old and die. So, there's that. So, therefore, the takeaway is we are called to make good use of the time that we have. So let me pray quickly, just to open it up. I know Steve did that already, and then we will read through the last two chapters. This is less than we did last week. Let me pray, and then we'll dive in. Father, I'm so thankful for your word, for these people that you have brought here this morning. I thank you for your kindness and goodness to us, for your Son. Father, there are many who are here who are perhaps distracted, discouraged, struggling with things at home, perhaps overjoyed. Wherever we are, would you use this time to speak into our hearts, to make us more like you? In your name I pray. Amen. Make sure my time is good. So let me read these last two chapters. Ecclesiastes chapters 11 and 12. Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. Give a portion to 7 or even to 8, for you know not what disaster may happen on earth. If the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves on the earth, and if a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where the tree falls, there it will lie. He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. As you do not know the way the Spirit comes to the bones in the womb of a woman with child, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything. In the morning sow your seed, and at evening withhold not your hand, for you don't know which will prosper, this or that, or whether both alike will be good. Light is sweet, and it is pleasant for the eyes to see the sun. So, if a person lives many years, let him rejoice in them all. But let him remember that the days of darkness will be many. All that comes is vanity. Rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and the sight of your eyes, but know that for all these things God will bring you into judgment. Remove vexation from your heart and put away pain from your body, for youth and the dawn of life are vanity. Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil day comes and the years draw near, of which you will say, I have no pleasure in them. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars are darkened, and the clouds return after the rain, in the day when the keepers of the house tremble, and the strong men are bent, and the grinders cease because they are few, and those who look through the window are dimmed, and the doors of the street are shut when the sound of the grinding is low, and one rises up at the sound of a bird, and all the daughters of song are brought low. They are afraid also of what is high, and terrors are in the way. The almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper drags itself along, and desire fails. because man is going to his eternal home, and the mourners go about the streets. Before the silver cord is snapped, or the golden bowl is broken, or the pitcher is shattered at the fountain, or the wheel is broken at the cistern, and the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. All is vanity. Stop there for this morning. So these are two chapters. The first chapter is dealing with fear. The second chapter gives us a call to remember your Creator. So we'll come to chapter 12 in a moment. But this first chapter, chapter 11, opens with a natural response to uncertainty. I want to be careful here. This last week, there were a number of events that probably shook many of you. There was he's younger than me, a young man who was murdered publicly and in a pretty bad way. And then there was another school where a young man went in and took the lives of two of his peers and then himself. These moments are not what we want to see. I hope that all of us can live to old age, long lives, die in peace, surrounded by our family. But when we see these events, they shake us. They should. Because they cause us to wrestle with hard realities, specifically death. That even though you or I may be, say, considered young, we aren't guaranteed another 50, 60 years of life. And these verses specifically are dealing with our response to these topics. And often that can be fear, and often that fear can lead to paralysis. Look at verses 3 and 4. We're going to just look at the problem I think that Solomon is dealing with here. If the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves on the earth. And if a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where the tree falls, there it will lie. He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. So, I'm not a farmer. I don't know if we have farmers here, but these seem to be farming observations, but you can apply them to your life in other ways. If you are planning, it's time to sow our crops for this year. And man, my wife's family, they have a dairy farm, and I know when it's time to go, you have to go. You can't say, it's my birthday. When they've got to work, they've got to work. And I see farmers out there, when it's time to harvest, it's time to harvest. But if I'm looking at the weather, and I'm waiting for the perfect opportunity to sow my seeds, that may never come. There's always going to be something, today would be a great day, this week is looking good, but man, Wednesday, it looks like it might rain. I'll do it next week. Or when it's time for harvest, man, I know we got to get to it, but this week is kind of chilly. Maybe I'll put it next week. If a farmer is waiting for a perfect opportunity to plant, to sow, to reap, he's never going to do it. Perhaps you've tried to schedule a picnic or something or a party, and you're constantly looking, when is the weather going to be perfect? And there's always that 20% chance of rain that likely won't happen, but it's enough that you reschedule until tomorrow, and then tomorrow never comes. I think a natural response often to fear, to uncertainty, is paralysis. Well, if I don't know what's going to happen, this is scary. Instead, I'll just do nothing. I don't know about you, but I want to be able to control things. I want to be able to say, if I take step A, then I can count on step B happening. If I plan for this, then I can know that this other thing is going to happen. I would like a clear path. if in my ideal world would be I'm in the woods and there's like one path that's bright and sunny and there's like butterflies flying around, and another path there's like spiders and lightning bolts and stuff like that, because don't go down that path, go down this really good path. But how often does that happen? Sometimes. But often God doesn't lead us through these clear pathways. Often there are parts of life that we don't understand. Often God's plan is confusing or difficult. Even the last 6 years in my town, there's been a number of folks who have been taken early, whether through farming accidents or accidents at their work or just sickness. People who have a ton to offer, whether just as individuals or offer God, their life came to an early end. And so maybe when we have these events, whether it's Solomon talking about death, it's kind of a downer, Solomon talking about death or seeing suffering, uncertainty, death around us, this can shake us and cause us to think, man, is anything certain? Unfortunately, I think Solomon's answer is that a life of fear is a life that misses out. So what's his solution? Look at verse 5. As you do not know the way the Spirit comes to the bones in the womb of a woman with child, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything. In other words, you and I don't know how a child is born, and we're okay with that. I have a young child, and it's an incredible thing the way a human is built. A human just is built automatically, and not only is the stuff built, the bones and the tissue, all of that of a little person is built automatically. The person comes out with thoughts, emotions. There's stuff inside the person that's not just stuff. It's an amazing thing if we think about it, but we just say, when are you expecting? When is this happening? When are you going to generate a brand new creature that's going to have all of this to it? We're just, sure, of course. We're okay with not understanding all of how that happens. So he says, you don't know that part, so it's okay not to know what God's plan is. There's two ways that we can deal with uncertainty. One, I can say, man, I don't know what God's trying to do with my life. Like, what do I do? Or you can say, man, I don't know what God's trying to do with my life. Like, we could go anywhere from here. It's the same sentence. How we view that uncertainty hinges on how we view God. How we view that uncertainty hinges on how we view God. So there's a parable in the New Testament. We don't have to turn there because it's a long parable. Matthew 25, if you want to read that on your own time. The parable of the tongues. So Jesus tells a story, and he's telling the story to teach us something. And in this story, there's this master who goes on a trip. And the master brings 3 of his servants to himself, and he says, hey, guys, I'm leaving, and I want you to do business for me while I'm gone. So he gives the first servant 5 talents. It's a piece of money. And he gives this next servant 2 talents, and he gives a third servant 1 talent. So he says, guys, I want you to do business with me while I'm gone. When I come back, we can see how we did. So the first servant goes out and puts his master's money at risk, does business, invests the money, and turns it into 10. He doubles it. The second servant takes the 2 and turns it into 4. Got to make sure I do my math right. The third servant takes his 1 talent and buries it. So when the master returns, he brings the 3 servants to himself and says, all right, how are we doing? The first servant says, you gave me 5, here's 10. The master's response is, well done, good and faithful servant. The next guy comes to him, Master, you gave me 2, here's 4. The master's response is, well done, good and faithful servant. I think it's really cool. The master doesn't say, bro, the first guy started out with 5 and you only brought me back 4? Are you kidding me? No. The second servant was equally as faithful as the first servant. The third guy says, Master, you gave me 1, here's what is yours. I was afraid of you being an angry, harsh ruler, and so instead of putting that money out, because I only had 1, I brought it back to you. And the master is angered by this servant. So what's the difference between these 3? Because 2 of them, they do have the same response, and the same response from the master, and the third clearly has a very different plan and a very different response from the master. The parables are cliff notes, and they're not trying to give us every detail, but something that I think might be an answer is we see from the third guy that he's afraid, and he views the master as an angry guy who, if he falls short, is going to, fire him, beat him up, whatever, put him in prison. The first 2 guys, we just assume that they are going to double their money. Well, of course you're going to double your money. But if you ever started a small business, there's Naples, where we currently live, has a lot of small businesses. And I never realized how much risk there is when you start a small business. There's a lot of chance for something good coming out of it, but there's also a lot of chance where the business shows up, they do some stuff, and then they go out of business 3 years later. These people were risking their master's money by doing this business. And yet they're still willing to do that. So I want to suggest maybe a little bit of speculation that their view of the master was different from the third guy. The third guy viewed the master as an angry, judgmental guy who, if you fail, you're done. These guys were willing to lose the master a lot, but they must have felt safe enough in their standing with him, in their knowledge of who their master was, that they were willing to step out into that uncertainty. So the question, how would you characterize your view of God? So obviously, there's words that we say when we're sitting in Sunday school class. But when you're going through life, when you face uncertainty, difficulty, what are the words that describe how we view God? You view him as the angry type, who's, man, you failed me again. He's just waiting for us to fall short. How is God portrayed in the New Testament? Let's think about that. He's portrayed as holy, righteous, jealous, often. But in the New Testament, let's think about 2 ways that God is portrayed. First, we see God portrayed through the person of Jesus, who is Christ. This is a man who was completely patient with disciples that fall short over and over and over. He's also a guy that says, hey, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. He's a man that says, hey, when you're bent over, when you're struggling, when you feel insecure, when you don't know what the answer is, you feel like you're falling short as a dad, as a kid, as a mom, come to me, and I will give you rest. We also see God portrayed as a father. Some of us may not have fathers who were great. I do. Some of us may be a father. Some of us may not be capable of being fathers. That's probably half of the congregation. But think about how does a good parent look at their child? I called and you didn't come right away. What are you doing? Is that maybe? I've been blown away by my heart towards my little girl. I never knew that you could treasure somebody so much. And that's a very selfish dad, very human, sinful dad. So imagine taking that selfishness and that sinfulness out of the equation. Imagine taking the finiteness of humanity out of the equation, and all you have is the way that God looks at you and me, if we are his children. So that's our God. Your view of God is one of the most important things about you. It will impact everything else, especially how we view uncertainty. Okay, ready for a fun historical story? I'm going to give you 5 seconds. George B. McClellan. Figure out who this guy is. George B. McClellan. He's a Civil War general. I know that we have some Civil War reenactors. When I was a kid, a number of my friends did Civil War reenacting, and I found out that it's still a thing now, which is awesome. George B. McClellan was a Union general over the Army of the Potomac. None of this matters. I don't know why I'm sharing these dumb details. He was a Union general during the early parts of the Civil War. He was a fantastic army builder. He was great at training and drilling his men, but his shortfall was he was afraid to damage his beautiful army. He built great armies, but he was afraid to use them, to risk them, to lose them. And this came to a head as a serious problem when he went up against the Confederate leader, Robert E. Lee. So McClellan was apparently known for overestimating his opponent's numbers. So the Union Army was almost always much, much larger than the Confederate armies, but McClellan overestimated his opponents, and in one case, he went up against Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee was one of 2 times, I believe, invading into the North, and the Union and the Confederates met, and they fought the bloodiest single day of the Civil War. And the Confederates were beat. Well, they both lost a lot, but the Confederates were running away. And this is an opportunity for McClellan to go finish the job. You've got way more guys than they do. Chase after him. You're both tired. You're both exhausted. You both lost a lot. But you have way more than he does. End it right now. And who knows? We can never know what might have been, but he chooses not to. He thought that the retreat was a feint and that if he charged in, he would get surrounded and destroyed. Lincoln fires him for this failure. Another gentleman who was building his name at this time in a much smaller sphere was Ulysses S. Grant. Maybe this name is more familiar to you. Grant later becomes the general over all of the armies of the U.S. Grant's style was very different. He achieved the nickname, I don't know from whom or through whom or where this came up, as Butcher. And one of the reasons for this was when he fought, his battles were very bloody. He lost a lot of guys. He did make a lot of mistakes, but in general, his fights were very bloody. The difference between him and McClellan was afraid, and so he hung back. Grant must have known 2 things. One, that my status with the president is safe. I can fail. And the second one is, our end goal is set up. We are going to win this war. I just need to bring it to an end. And so he hammers Lee over and over and over, never giving Lee a break, never giving him a chance to catch his breath. The end of the war is Grant just kind of chasing Lee around until finally Lee kind of gets stuck. Point is, these 2 guys, 2 generals, both very good generals, very different ways of responding to uncertainty. McClellan is afraid and ultimately gets fired by it. Grant is willing to dive into that uncertainty, into that suffering, and there's a car alarm outside. That might be my keys. Go through that uncertainty. So, these first verses, an encouragement. Let's just wait until it's done. I'm just going to lock my car, make sure. It's good. It's good. That's good. I was making a joke about people's cell phones going off, and then somebody called me. Somebody called me right in the middle of it. And my phone went off while I'm making a joke about people's cell phones. The timing could not have been worse. Okay, there's a clock, so I will not go too much longer. So just from these verses, rather than being fearful, trust your Father and invest the time well that we have been given. Speaking of investing the time, the rest of these scriptures are directed at specifically young people. But all of us are to a greater or lesser extent young. We all have life coming after us. But let's read verses 8 and 9. And he's going to give a calling to those of us to use our time wisely. Verse 8. So, if a person lives many years, let him rejoice in them all, but let him remember that the days of darkness will be many, and that all that comes is vanity. Rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth.
It's a red van, town and country.
Everyone close your eyes for a second. Too slow. Walk in the ways of your heart and the sight of your eyes, but know that for all these things God will bring you into judgment. There was a couple years ago, we've done outdoor services at our church since COVID during the summer. It's just kind of a fun thing. But it was like the 4th of July, and a bald eagle flew over. And so everyone stopped to watch this eagle fly over because it's kind of cool. It's the 4th of July. And the eagle circled us for 10 minutes. So the poor pastor's up there being like, guys, I'm running out of time here, and this eagle won't go away. Let me read this one more time. Rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and the sight of your eyes, but know that for all these things God will bring you into judgment. So I love what Solomon says here. So again, he specifically is talking to young man, young person, but I think we can extrapolate. All of us, we have time ahead of us. But there's two things that he gives. He gives an encouragement, but also with a caution. And if this is in fact an old Solomon looking back over his life, then it makes these verses make so much more sense. He says, rejoice in your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and the sight of your mind. Be excited about your life, but know that for all these things God will bring you into judgment. And I love that second part because Solomon, who messed up a lot, especially at the end of his life, he had 1,000 wives/girlfriends, and they drew his heart away from God. At the end of his life, he actually loses. God comes to him and says, hey, I'm going to take the kingdom away from you because you have been faithless in this area. So Solomon can look back at his life and say, hey, I made all these mistakes. Don't do the same mistakes. Go after life, but go after the good things of life. And I think this is a really good reminder to all of us. If we don't need to be afraid, if our status with our Father is secure, that He's looking on you and me and He's like, I love that guy, I love that girl, she's the best. We can focus on taking the life that God has given to us and going after it all out. Think about a hose. If you have a hose that's, the water's not coming out, maybe you're pulling it out and it got one of those stupid kinks in it, and so the water's coming out in a dribble. You're not going to mess up much with that hose, right? You're not going to cause any problems in the dirt, but spraying. You're not going to spray the wrong person. But it really has very little use to it, right? That's why we have to unkink it. We want the flow of the water. But now think about a fire hose. Fire hose has incredibly destructive potential. The stream of that water you can hit the wrong person. You shouldn't do it at a person. You can hit a person, you can hit windows, but it also has the ability to do great things. Something that a little dribbling hose cannot do. And if we think about our lives in the same way, Solomon says, guys, I want you to go after life. Chase after life, especially those of you who are high school, 20s, middle school. It's hard. What do I want? People ask me, what do I want to do when I grow up? And I'm only 12, I'm only 14, I don't know. What are the things that God is building in you? Like the things that people notice. Hey, you're really good at this. You were awesome at this. Go after those things. Because He is creating you to be this person. He's got a purpose for you. Chase after those things. And I love this encouragement from Solomon. Our days are few. So go after it hard. Go after it with joy. He's going to add on to this in chapter 12 with the calling to remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the end of your life comes. I won't read these again. In the early parts of chapter 12, there's a lot of kind of weird descriptions. It talks about the strong men are bent. The grinders cease because they are few. Those who look through the windows are dimmed. It's kind of, Solomon, what are you doing here at the end? But I think Solomon is giving poetic descriptions of the human body breaking down. So the grinders cease because they are few. It's talking about age bringing our bodies to their end. Some of you may be starting to experience that now. Some of you may be in the midst of experiencing that. Some of you haven't gotten there now. And his calling is, go after life, remember your Creator before your body starts to break down. I know when I was in high school, when I was in my 20s, old age felt like forever. And then suddenly I was 34, and it just happened. Our lives are not, it's kind of funny, but it also happens really quickly, right? Too quickly. I want to think very quickly about this calling, remember your Creator. Go to Psalm 90. I'm just going to read a few verses to wrap this up with what does it mean to remember your Creator? Psalm 90 is not tied to Ecclesiastes or in any way. I was speaking to my family and I was talking to them about this idea of remembering your Creator, and my sister Felicity, some of you may remember, she just pulled Psalm 90 out and was like, you should go to Psalm 90. So there's three things that we can do when it comes to remembering our Creator, three meanings. Let's look at verses 1 through 4 quickly. Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world from everlasting to everlasting. You are God. You return man to dust and say, return, children of man. For 1,000 years in your sight are but as yesterday when it is past, or as a watch in the midnight. What does it mean to remember your Creator? Our Creator is infinite. While we are very temporary compared to this earth is nothing compared to our Creator. Despite our finiteness, despite our mortality, the brevity that we are here, the brevity of what we can accomplish, we serve a Creator who is bigger than everything we see around us, who lives longer than everything we see around us. And we can trust in that. Nothing is happening around you in your life that God's like, whoops, didn't see that coming. There's nothing that surprises him, including you. I was talking to a kid a couple weeks ago and just thought that probably God's giving up on him. And it's a reminder, God's not like, well, I didn't see this coming. I didn't see you making these choices. He is bigger than us. He knows more than us. And yet he still chooses to love us. Verse 12, teach us to number our days that we may get a heart of wisdom. Again, I'm just picking these verses out, just some thoughts from what it might mean to remember your Creator. Our Creator calls us to number our days, to be good stewards of our life. So like the three servants who are each given resources, and the master says, take these talents, 5, 2, 1, whatever it is that I've given to you, and do business with them. We've been given resources. We've been given time. We live in America. We've been given wealth. We've been given relationships. We've been given a church, beautiful place to live. God has given us all these things, and he calls us to be good stewards of that. So someday we can present these things back to him. Then second to lastly, verse 14, satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love, that we may rejoice and be glad in our days. Our Creator made us to delight in him, to be satisfied in him. Solomon was not alone in searching for satisfaction. All of us are looking for something to fulfill us, to satisfy us, to give us that life that when we get to the end of it, we say, wow, what a full life. Like that would be the dream, that when you're on your deathbed, you sit back and you say, what a full life. We all want that, right? Solomon looked for it in all the wrong places. Wealth goes away. Sometimes there's money in your pocket at the beginning of the day and it's gone by the end of the day. Possessions fail, they break, they fall apart. People, relationships. If you think that dating somebody or marrying somebody as a single individual, that they are going to just be the perfect person and will never fail you, that's not going to happen. Because you're going to fail them, and they're going to fail you. We are not built to satisfy. Things are not built to satisfy. God is the one who's built to satisfy. And he has created us to delight in him. If we are satisfied in him, then all the other stuff is like icing or dessert. You know, dessert is awesome, but if we have too much dessert, you feel bad because it's not meant to fill us up. Go after the thing that will truly satisfy, and then all these other gifts that we have, possessions, relationships, these are just wonderful things that just add to that. The last verse, I'm just going to read verse 17 very briefly. Let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us and establish the work of our hands upon us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. Remember that everything we do sits in the hand of our God. And if we are to live a flourishing, joyful, satisfied life, then that requires him to establish us. So let's just some final thoughts to tie all these things together. From these last two chapters. First, if you have a relationship with Jesus, you don't need to fear uncertainty. Your standing with him is set, is safe. And he's not taken by surprise by any of the things that go on. We are free to advance through that uncertainty. Doesn't make it easy, doesn't make it fun, but we don't need to be fearful or paralyzed by them. Second, don't put off following Jesus. I think much like many things, it's easy to think, I'll do something tomorrow. I'll start following Jesus when I'm an adult. Right now I'm just a kid. I'll start following Jesus when I'm an adult. Maybe you're an adult. Man, it's just really busy with the kids running around. I'll wait until the kids are out and then, start following Jesus. That term can be scary. Man, if I follow Jesus, that mean I gotta become a pastor or gotta go become a missionary in Africa or something like that. Here's a thought. Especially, for all of us. What is one thing that you can do this week as a step of following Jesus? Doesn't mean I'm going to go up and get in front of all my classmates and preach the gospel. What is one simple thing that you and I can do this week to follow Jesus? Maybe it's something simple as, I'm going to again pick on the kids. This is like the one time where Solomon is specifically talking to kids, to young people. Maybe it's this. Mom and Dad and I have been butting heads a lot. We've been arguing lately, and they're really tough. So this week, I'm going to, instead of responding in anger, I'm going to respond, yes, Mom, yes, Dad, or I love you, thanks, Mom, thanks, Dad. Something simple like that. Or maybe my neighbor that, I'm going to go over and say hi to him. You know your lives. What is one simple thing? We do that. We are taking little steps to be more like our Savior. Third, we honor God when we delight in him. Talk about giving God the glory. You'll see somebody who's making a speech and just say, before I begin, I just want to give God the glory. That's fine. But you want to really reflect Jesus well? Be a person who is genuinely joyful, who is genuinely satisfied by Christ. I was a server during my college days. As for servers, we complain a lot. What if, instead of complaining, I were to focus on how can I encourage the servers around me? How can I help make their day better? When I do that, that's not fake. People see that. Something's different about you. Lastly, and unfortunately I closed my Bible, the last few verses of Ecclesiastes. There's a little statement. When all has been summed up is this: fear God and keep his commandments. Fear God and keep his commandments. How do we sum up all the thoughts of Ecclesiastes on how to follow Jesus, how to be godly people? We don't have to have the answers. We don't need to be the boldest person in the room. Take steps, fear God, and keep his commandments. My phone that I threw earlier, I've had a problem with it, and that the charging port gets dirty. Maybe you've had this issue before. And it leads it to not charging or charging infrequently. And one of the worst things you can do is wake up and see your phone battery at 6%, because then the rest of your day, your phone's always going to be almost dead. And so this happened to me maybe 6 months ago, and I learned that it's because lint gets in there. And so I went in there with the tweezers. I plugged it in, nothing. Took some tweezers, swirled it around, tried to clear stuff out. Plugged it in, nothing. So, okay, I'll be a little bit more intense. Went in there with the tweezers, turned it around, plugged it in, still nothing. Okay, went in there, went hardcore, throwing dynamite in there, everything to get this thing clean. Came back, plugged it in, still nothing. And it was then that I realized something that I had overlooked. The bottom of the cord was hanging at my feet. So it's a dumb, silly, the phone doesn't work if it's not plugged into the power source. We want to go through uncertainty, difficulty, youth, we got to make sure we're plugged into the power source. So that's the takeaway from that. Make sure you are satisfied, you're plugged into our Savior. Let me pray, and then the worship team will come up. Father, thank you so much for your word. Thank you for these people, for the things that we can learn. Thank you for being patient with us, for being good to us when we struggle with uncertainty, with youthfulness. In your name we pray. Amen.